Hi, welcome to tonight's Science Cafe. I'm Dr. Roxanne Millay-Bruni with the Research Division, and I'm really pleased that you all are out here tonight on such a nice night. A couple housekeeping items. Tell you what, can I borrow your t-shirt? Okay, so tonight we have Dr. Jim Thomas, and he's going to be talking about what, guys? Somebody answer the question. What? Virtual reality. First t-shirt. Yes, that is how you get these t-shirts. If you ask a question or if you answer a question that is asked by our speaker, you get a t-shirt. And don't be concerned, sometimes we air bomb them to you, so it's okay. They're soft. Okay, the other thing I wanted to tell you guys, what is April 14th? Oh, no t-shirt for this one, sorry. What is special about Thursday, April 14th? Student Expo, that's right. Where is it, guys? It's at the Convo. Imagine 839 this year students, undergraduate, graduate, medical students presenting their research and creative activity any way that is legal and safe. Cement canoes, art installations, flying cars, posters, you name it, we will have it, plus lots of pizza. So I hope you guys can make it there. This is actually our second to last Science Cafe. Well, the next one is actually a cafe conversation. It's our non-science Science Cafe. And that's going to be given by Dr. Lauren Leibarger from the Classics and World Religion. Radical Islam, what's religion got to do with it? I think that this is a really important and topical thing to discuss. I will tell everybody, please come next week and join us, but we do expect everybody to have a civil conversation about this, okay? So, with no more, tonight I'd like to introduce Dr. James Thomas from the Physical Therapy Department. Actually, is it even a department anymore? It's Rehabilitation and Communication. Something, yeah. And HSP, and he is going to be talking about, just like you said, virtual reality and rehabilitation. Jim, yours.
All right. Let's get ready to rumble! It might be a little, that seems a bit loud, at least in my head. All right, well, one, I'd like to thank Rox for inviting me here to do this talk today. What I'm going to be talking you through is essentially virtual reality and rehabilitation. As I give today's talk, and we're going to do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to present some of the work that we're doing. I'm going to give you some background and information so that you have an idea of what goes on in actually trying to develop a intervention with virtual reality tools. At any point, stop, interrupt, ask questions. I'd be glad to sort of knock some things about with people. And then what we're going to do is, so that'll be the first half. The second half, it's a little bit of show and tell. We actually have a Oculus Rift here with a Leap Motion sensor. So we have some of the latest hardware and software, and we'll get an opportunity to have some people come up and you can see some of the pitfalls and some of the advantages of virtual reality. And so without further ado, we'll try to move through this. Well, virtual reality storms into 2016, right? So this was in a USA Today story about 3-4 weeks ago. It was fortuitous. I saw this on a plane ride over when I was giving a lecture on this in Virginia. And they're basically saying, hey, this is really a neat technology, but there's a lot of issues that have to be resolved, and there's potential problems in this. Now, I'm going to talk about virtual reality and rehabilitation, and I'm going to really talk about it primarily from the idea of sensory motor rehab. There's a great amount of work that's being done in cognitive behavioral. There's a lot of things that are being done in helping individuals through post-traumatic stress disorders. But again, there's some real issues and limitations with this. So again, as we get through this conversation, hopefully you'll have a better appreciation of what's available and what we can do. So starting with the definition, what is VR? And basically we're talking about a computer interface that involves some kind of real-time simulation. Essentially what we're saying is we want to create an alternative world in which, or alternative space in which you drop the person in and that they actually believe that they're in that space and that there is what they call this high agency or presence, that you actually really believe that you are, in whatever environment we put you in, that you're actually having a belief that you're in that environment and separating it from everything else. And when you try the Oculus or see some of the things later, you'll see how easy it is to sort of get fully distracted within that. So a couple of definitions, and I hate to have too many of these, but we have to start with how immersed are you? And so in non-immersive, these are sort of the images that are presented on a standard TV. You go home, you play your Wii or the not Xbox, the Kinect, and you're seeing something on a 2D TV that's considered non-immersive. You're really not getting too much going on there. Semi-immersive is where we're using a 3D display. So you have your shutter goggles, and now you're getting a better representation in 3 space, and again, you're starting to get further into that world, a better level of agency or presence. And then fully immersive. And so in this is where this allows for the scenes to really change. And we'll see later with the Oculus, if I'm wearing the Oculus Rift and I'm in a fully immersive system, if I turn left, I'm seeing the left side of the room, which what's happening on the graphics is the graphics have to shift actually the opposite direction that I'm moving. So there's a number of things that have to go on with this. So again, it's always good to know where we've been. But historically, this is your first piece of VR, and essentially this is a little stereoscopic viewer. They just drop in the little a disc. It has some pictures that are offset, and you can see things in 3 space. And some people are going, I remember those. And as typical, a lot of the technology was driven by the military. So in the 1940s, the link trainer. So basically, they're trying to teach pilots to fly by instrumentation without just putting them up into a plane and letting them go. So they're going to put him into this box. He's not seeing anything but his flying instruments, and they're moving the platform. As we go to the next level, then you started getting flight simulators. And what they would do is they would build these giant dioramas, these scale models, and then run a camera along them, and the cameras would run along, and then that would be portrayed to the pilots sitting in the booth. Now, again, these things were enormous, and they were using these hangars, and so the first thing they had them laid out flat, and then they realized, well, we can't change scenes very easily, so then they started stacking them vertically and just altering the camera and then rotating the image. But this is some of the earlier VR. Now, you go to the next gen, now you have sort of the flight simulators that are being used by the pilots, and this started in the 50s. And if you see this platform bouncing up and down, this allows the individual, the pilots, as they're training, they can actually get some haptic or actual motion feedback while the scenes are changing. And we're going to come back to that in just a second. So if we look here, this is the early. This is the precursor. These are the head-mounted displays. This has now been replaced by this. Now, if you looked at this would take a room full of computers to run, but again, early training in the military, trying to train the pilots, this is what they were using. So in 1977, Disney decided, hey, you know what? I want to put together a sort of ride that combines motion and some animation. Well, it kind of came true when in '87 when they put together the Star Wars rides. Now, the Star Wars ride, again, you can see up here, you get in that box and it moves you around. And so basically, in this thing, it's a motion-based platform. And you get feelings of acceleration or deceleration, and those are sort of enhanced by the graphics that are coming at you and sort of shaking and vibration in the seats. However, what you may not know is that the visual cues are not synchronized with the motion. Now, here's a funny little thing about that. When those things aren't synchronized, you get a little seasick. Disney knows exactly how many frames to offset the visual stimuli from the motion stimuli to make most people feel a little queasy. So you can imagine being the test subjects for this. But they would go through, and so they know exactly. And the reason this is all based on heavy market research, because they want to sit there and say, we want more people. And if people don't get off a ride and feel a little queasy, they think they got ripped off. So again, this idea of offsetting the visual stimuli from the motion and what you're perceiving, they're doing this on purpose to make you a little bit off balance. the thing is, if we start thinking about interventions now, well, there's a lot of people that have balance disorders, and there are things. There's a thing called mal-de debarment syndrome. So people who are, if you ever been on a cruise ship, so you get on a cruise ship, right? You get off the ship, and what happens? You get, all of a sudden you stop, and you got on land, you've been on the ship for a few weeks, and also you go, wow, it takes a little bit for the rocking to start. Well, people with mal-de debarment syndrome, that rocking never goes away. So somehow the information that's coming through their visual system and through the vestibular, through the ears, is out of sync. So we're talking about trying to use some VR to try to resync these. So again, the body is very sensitive to how motion cues and visual cues are coming, and that's probably going to be one of the largest problems or challenges as people go forward, and I think people will experience today when we bring people up after to play with the Oculus, is that, out here we don't have my full lab and the ability to know precisely exactly where you are in space, and we're depending on some accelerometers within the device, and so that gets a little bit off, and you may feel yourself feeling a little bit queasy with this, and actually we'll ask people who actually tend to get motion sickness maybe not to volunteer. It might be a bigger problem after the lecture. Okay, and then obviously this is the latest sensor and that we're using. This is the Oculus 2 developer kit, and you see this Leap motion controller on the front. And how many people? Many people have a Kinect at home, or people know what the Kinect is, right? You have the device; it gives you that full body motion. Well, you'll see later on, the Leap motion sensor is a little tiny Kinect. It's got 3 little infrared cameras in it. And what we can do with that is actually do hand motion, and so in a very near field. And it's offering some really interesting opportunities to develop, again, interventions that you go, oh, if I can measure hand and arm motion with just this little sensor here, and if my motion sensors get a little better within this device or where the head is, I may be able to make these devices so that they can work for a home, a home intervention. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about developing an intervention for using virtual reality. And this is the first question we always have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze? And by that, I go, if I develop this again, this is that thing. We have technology. Oh, let's go use it. Well, is the technology really worth it? So does this, using an implementation of VR, improve outcomes over the standard of care? And again, by that I mean, how long did it take for them to achieve the treatment goals? Was it improved by using the VR? Did it have a greater ability to reduce disability? And does the VR translate into real world? So the question is, great, you put me in the Oculus and I can go all day. There's a little problem with this, is I have a hard time interacting with the real world if I'm only better by wearing the Oculus. Now, maybe that's the new look, I don't know, but the reality is that you're not going to be able to see things around you, and that becomes a challenge. So the idea of how well does this translate my treatment develop in VR to the real world? So again, what are the specific goals? Do I want to improve balance? Maybe reduce left-sided neglect. So this is a classic thing with people who have right hemiplegia or a stroke affecting the right side. They don't acknowledge or really see the entire the left side of their world goes away. And it's fascinating. You can ask them to draw a clock, and they will draw only the right side. It's really quite debilitating. So there are some things that we can use visual stimuli to try to sort of, again, reorient and improve stroke. So there's really some interesting things that we can do with this technology. Increase use of a paretic limb, and my favorite thing, I am a back pain specialist, so I am looking to increase how people use lumbar flexion. So, fidelity to the real world. Again, does the VR space, so when I create something in VR, how well does that map to the real world space? So if I put an object 15 centimeters in front of my nose, in VR, does that really correspond to something that's 15 centimeters in front of my nose in real world? Alternatively, can we distort the world to achieve a goal? So again, I was talking about the individuals with the left-sided neglect. I may want to distort that world in a purposeful manner to try to get them to engage in a space which they want to ignore. or again, because of the cortical damage that they are ignoring, and where they're trying to get a reestablishment of that. So this is a thing where I would say it's a problem in spatial fidelity. Here we have an individual. They are holding on to a dodgeball. They got both hands solid on it. And if we look on the screen, well, one hand is on it, and that's because the ball on the right is virtual. But basically, we know they're like this, but the system thinks they're like this. So that's a challenge. Here's another instant of this, and it's a little bit difficult to see, but this, in this picture, young lady has her arms completely extended. And if you look here, well, she got a little problem going one direction here and another direction in the other. So you can see that her arm is, in VR, is like this, and in real world, this is a bit of a problem. And so these are some of the things that, I guess when I'm got to, my audience is obviously going to be mixed bag. People, you may have people from engineering, people from gaming, thinking about, oh, how do I move forward? This is interesting. I'm going to make this app. The question is, this stuff is very complicated, and there's a lot of steps that have to be gone through to get an effective intervention. Temporal fidelity. So again, in time. So real time does not exist. There is always some measure of delay between what you're moving in real world and what you see on the screen and what you're reacting to. The question is, can we reduce it to an extent that it is workable? And I'm going to show you what we have here. This is and so what they're taking here is they're taking an Oculus, and then they're putting on the person and then giving them a video camera. So they're seeing the real world, but they're delaying that image by 1/3 of a second and then by 3 seconds. And the first part, you're going to see a young lady that they put this on, and she's going to go into a dance class. And she's going to try to follow, and she seems a little bit off. She's moving in response to the visual stimulus she sees. This young man is trying to cook an egg, but he's getting a delay in the visual stimulus, right? So they're basically delaying it, and he's trying to move. And yes, he almost made it. This poor girl, no one should be bowling. The last one's my favorite, though, because this is when they have a 3-second delay. You do not want to play ping pong with that guy. He's nothing but trouble. But the idea of the idea of syncing these things, yes, rocks. You're going to get a T-shirt for this? Sure. I'm going to skip the whole infidelity thing. Going to move right past that. But yes, so the question is, the issue, Rox, is that so how important is having the timing right? It's brutally important. Again, if I'm trying to teach a coordinative strategy, or the idea if they're playing the game and you go, wait a second, I move. And the avatar is not, it's not moving. I can't figure out how to make this right. So it's a big deal to try to get it to work correctly. And it's in terms of responsiveness, it's really interesting because I'm trying to think of the oldest subject we've had in this so far in some of the studies we've done. But I think we've had individuals as old as 60 into it, which is not very old, obviously. I understand that. But what I'm saying is that there are people who didn't, grow up playing video games. And look, I have 3 sons who play more Xbox than I care to think about, and I hate it. But they always think it's ironic that I'm actually doing work on gaming, essentially. But I think people engage in it, and when you put this on, it's really what we found, and particularly with the Oculus and the fully immersive, people step into it, and it's really interesting. So we developed, and again, I'll see social videos later, is that we developed a Dodgeball Gate. And when we were first doing it on a 3D TV, and then we said, oh, gee whiz, let's see if we can get this Oculus and make it work, and we got it. And the first time I played it with the Oculus, and the balls are being thrown at you, and they make contact with, in the virtual world, you find yourself ducking it and like almost pulling back like you were physically hit. So the extent that you can do it, I think it's independent of age. You're dropping people into an environment. If it's believable, I think it has great potential. Now, again, the question is, what are the games that an individual wants to play at various age cohorts? I mean, I think that's a really important one. And yeah, how people interact with the world and what they find entertaining. I think the idea of it being able to adapt this to the different perspectives is important. Again, this is actually this is another system using the full thing. This came out of the movie Battleship. And again, what they're doing here with this gentleman is in a Karen system, and they're showing a full screen that goes around, and then they're trying to monitor. But that system has a lot of problems with latency because the size of the screens and some of the technical difficulty with getting the movement to align with what they're seeing on the screen. But it is being used in a number of rehab facilities. So I've talked about the avatar and agency or presence, and the level of immersion is important. But this idea of first versus third person perspective, and I'm going to show you a couple clips here. Here's the Oculus. This is first person perspective. We live in a first person world, right? We don't see our feet unless we bend forward and look down, and this is what she sees. And if she looks around the gym or looks up and around, she is now in first person. Alternatively, this is now we're seeing her in third person. What she's doing, she's moving. She's got the 3D TV. There's a couple things to notice here. One, obviously she's moving and she's actually controlling her avatar. So from a neurophysiologic perspective, she now has to translate the movement of this avatar into some sort of coordinate strategy so that she can control it. So it's different. The other thing with the 3D TV is that you'll notice that when she goes left, right, the screen, nothing changes, right? When she's with the Oculus, as she looks up, she starts to see the ceiling. The scene moves with her. And again, this is another example. This is a little bit of her playing, but again, balls are being thrown at her virtually, and then she's trying to move or reach out and perform a task, but she's trying to get her avatar to do it. And some of the stuff, depending on our timing today, will actually show some of the differences, because people behave very different. The way they complete any given task is very dependent on whether they're in a first person or third person. And so that comes into play when you're thinking about game development. So the development of the game is, I like to call it the Goldilocks phenomena. If you make the game too easy, patients get bored and they don't engage in the behaviors. If it's too difficult, they get frustrated and they stop and I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And so trying to find that line. And so when we developed this game of Dodgeball, and again, my colleague Dr. Francis here, and we sat down and tried to think of a way to engage people. We said, well, Dodgeball is always fun. Let's start with this, and this was our original drawing. Okay, we're going to throw, we're going to have opponents throw balls at the patient, and they're going to have to move to block those balls. And so that's really where we started. Then we said, okay, well, let's draw out the gym, and these are the opponents, and they can move so much left and right, up and down. And the other thing that was interesting in games, when you're developing this, it's always talking about the script. What is the script? And so you're really writing a story and then a set of rules of, oh, well, these guys, there's 4 guys, they can go up and back, left and right. They're going to do this many throws. They're going to do an X number of degrees of freedom. Then we have, this is our surround. We had this made for us by WorldBiz. And so this is actually the gym at, I believe it's University of Indiana's gym is what it's modeled after. Anyone who's familiar with that thing. And so again, the contract is we have a player and we have our 4 opponents. And then we say we're going to throw balls at an individual, and we're going to throw 15 balls, and they're going to be distributed across from the head down to our lowest level. And the reason we sort of created this distribution is, again, trial and error. When we had things, the balls less dispersed, we found people played our game like this. Can I have my check now? And so really what we had to do was make this dynamic. I wanted people to come upright, to reach down, and between each throw, they had to come back to an upright posture. And so we set this thing up, and then the order of the balls was permutated so that it changed. And then like every good video game, there's levels. So we made each level more difficult, and because we wanted people to move, the lower levels, they had to go further to actually be successful than they had for the uppers. So the constructs of the game were points were scored by blocking the virtual balls. Points were lost if the balls made contact with the player's avatar. And the intended impact height was basically caused them to move in a certain way. So if we wanted someone to move more, throw the balls lower. If we wanted to move less, throw the balls higher. And within that, again, I'm kind of glossing over a lot of the details of how fast you throw the balls. What is the interval between the ball throws? And those things were just a lot of iterative over and over and a lot of pilot testing. So these game development takes quite a bit, even for a simple game like this. And again, for the techno geeks out there, we have a little flow chart. We do our motion capture of what the person's doing, gets fed into our game controller, which talks back and forth with our graphics generator, and then gets kicked out to our video output. So our motion capture, again, we track with a series of cameras what is happening with these cluster markers. And so what you do is we have a person instrumented. We have clusters on the feet, shank, thigh, lower back, upper back, head, upper arms, lower arms, and hands. And so if that person moves and reaches for something, we can recreate. We have the data here, and this is what we can recreate and grab from that. And this gives you a little example of what we get out of this. This is a person playing the game, so you can see that we recreate and get all their movements. This is their lumbar spine motion, which I'm particularly interested in, and then we know when they were successful and when they weren't. So, let's see, we're on time, okay. What we decided to do was say, you know what? How do people do things differently if they play the game on a 3D TV in a third-person perspective, so they're seeing their avatar, versus playing it in the Oculus with the first person. So again, it's a science cafe, and much to Rock's dismay, I'm actually going to present data. And I'll make this rather quick so we can get onto some of the neat stuff, more of the neat stuff. But again, we decided to say, what was different between these two methods of playing? And so this is what it looked like when they played the game. So now they're playing in the Oculus. She's in a first-person perspective. And what you're going to see, a minion will light up and it'll launch a ball. They get feedback of whether they were actually successful or not. They blocked it, or the ball made contact with the body, the virtual ball. What we have embedded in the ball itself is a little haptic feedback, so you get a little vibration. The next generation of systems will actually have haptic feedback in each of these marker clusters, so they'll know exactly where they got hit. So they'll actually feel contact when they're playing the game to try to induce better realism. So they are actually watching this here, and this is their score, and every time they get a green light, that means they've actually gotten a point, and they get a little additional resources or money provided for them in the game. So that's an individual playing the Dodgeball Gate, and they play 2 sets, and they play 3 different levels of gameplay. So now she's going to play this game, and this is in the 3D TV. And so she's got the shutter goggles on here, and then she's watching the avatar. We've had to make the avatar a bit translucent here because when we started off it was solid, in which case they couldn't see the ball being held in front of them. That was a little bit of a problem. And so now she's trying to block. And one of the things that's really interesting, you'll even see here, is that, she took one right in the kisser there, is that they're much less successful playing in having to control the avatar in the third-person perspective than they did in the first. So people generally were more frustrated when they played this game because they were less successful. So just a couple quick results. Again, this is just success rate. So the clear is Oculus, so you can see that they were much more successful compared to the 3D TV. So they're more successful. They felt better playing the game with the Oculus than they did with the 3D TV, and I'm not going to go any further than that. So I said that they move differently, and I'm going to basically let you just trust me, is that all the solid circles here are the Oculus for the different joints of the ankle, knee, hip, and spine. And for each sort of trajectory, you can see that they moved more. They move more when playing in a first-person perspective than playing in a third. There's a lot of things of why they move more, and we're actually playing around with, depending on where we put the where we place the camera to change the perspective, how it influences movement. This again, from a perspective of a PT, and thinking about it, there may be future PTs. I know there's PT students in the audience, but the idea of, oh, I want my patient to do X. And so really we're thinking about how can we use this technology to make them do that. Okay, I'm going to kind of go through there. And the last thing I want to show you, which is kind of, I think kind of neat here before we open this up, is this is the other thing that we're doing now. And one of our Oculus has the ability to track eye motion. So we have embedded, not in the system I brought today, but we have one, and we can track where the person is looking and get a lot of information. So we can sit there, he's scanning the scanning the minions, trying to see who's going to launch. He's checking the score to see how he's doing, and then going through the process of trying to play the game, reaches out to touch one of the balls. Now, one of the things, I just want to go through this real quick in terms of the frame by frame. Here the minion lit up green, which he knows he's going to launch. He's gotten his eyes there, but the ball's already gone. He's still trying to catch up with it. Now he's got it, and now he's anticipating where the ball is coming down, and now he's made contact. So to finish up the sort of talking part until we get to the fun demos, VR is coming. And in fact, people would say it's here. The applications are limitless. For the PTs or future clinicians out there, you really got to start with what are the goals of your intervention and realize that the development of an effective treatment strategy is a very iterative process. And so acknowledgments, I'd like to my colleagues here, and my co-creator of this game, Dr. Chris Francis here, Brian Clark, Dave Russ, Tim Law, and Dr. Steve Wachowski, Masato Nakasawa, all at OU, Peter Pitko at VCU, Zena Tross at University of North Texas, Steve Lavender at OSU, Daniel Korkis in Northwestern. Our funding sources through the National Institutes of Health and Osteopathic Heritage, and then my lab team who has been really quite helpful for me. So at that point, I'm willing to open it up for questions, and then we can demonstrate and play with the toys I brought. Yes. Yes. So, great question. Can two people interact with an Oculus? Yes, but it requires. We ran this. The software we ran it on was a Vizard Lite, which was $79 to do multiple players. I think it's either $6,000 or $12,000 for the software upgrade, which we are doing. And so some of the things we're also playing with now, you saw the games where the minions were basically robotic. There was no motion. We're actually now developing ways to use our motion capture system, do live capture of somebody, record that, and then feed that into the game so the person could interact with, oh, I want them to mimic this motion, or we want to try them, one of my sons plays baseball, so I'm like, I wonder if we can get a pitcher in there and get a pitching game where someone could actually have a virtual batting experience against a high end pitcher. So there are things where we can have them interact, but again, it's really a software limitation. There's a place, the Cave at University of Illinois Chicago. It's one of the bigger, probably the best virtual reality place in the country right now. Will have multiple people interacting across space. Plugged into, yes. Yes, yes. Well, yes, it has to be plugged in, and this is one of the, yeah. So it was asked if it has to be plugged in, and yes. One of the limitations right now, and one of the frustrations, is it has to be plugged into a very high-end, the Oculus has to be plugged into a very high-end laptop. We had one, a really nice light one, and it didn't work. I got this thing just a week ago. It's 10 pounds. But it's the only laptop on the market right now that will run Oculus. It takes crazy high amounts of computing power, which is one of the things I'm going to find interesting in the public release, whether people will be able to utilize it. But yes, it needs to be tied in for most things that we do.
Are there any documented side effects of using it for too long, especially like snake eyes or anything?
That's a really good question. I think there are some issues, and I'm not sure about on sort of. Are there any documented issues on damage from the Oculus to the eyes? I'm not familiar with it. I don't suspect there'll be visual issues. There are some cognitive behavioral things that are emerging and the problems with this. Again, the bigger thing is that when you have this system and you put it on, and I'm going to just light this up for just a second to show some people because I think it'll help as we go through this. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so we have our Oculus here. Now, if anyone starts to feel a little bit, ooh, that doesn't feel too good. The reality is that if this graphics are really high and really, really good, that you are perceiving that you are moving. If you are not moving or we're not calculating that my head moved X number of degrees, that means I have to rotate the scene X number of degrees the other direction. That causes problems with nausea, and it has a problem with us trying to get the behavior we want. So there's a real complicated thing. The other side is the graphics. We're running in our lab a large-scale workstation with two, I think, $800 graphic cards tied together to make it all work. It's really still requires a lot of computing power. Now, that may be like in 6 months where you go, oh, well, yeah, I can do that on my phone, the way technology changes. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as much as an evaluative tool. I guess it has potential for evaluation. The problem is it's not measuring any kind of motion. What the real interesting part of this is let's say that I have someone who, let's say I want to work with someone who has problems with walking and they're having a problem clearing an obstacle. Now, I could put a bunch of obstacles on the floor and have them catch those and maybe they trip. What I could do, though, is create an environment where I have virtual objects and then basically have them try to clear them. And if I can get some measurement of that, or I can provide some haptic feedback to let them know when they've made contact, then we can start to train them. So that's kind of where I don't think it's something as much evaluative as much as being something that's going to be used as an intervention. One of the big things that's going to evolve in this is these things called IMUs, or inertial monitoring units. And it's basically saying it'll tell you where your body part is relative to the line of gravity. And so if I have a couple of these on, I can say, all right, how much is the arm, what's the position of the arm? Those things were $3,000 2 years ago. They're down to about $400 now for the commercial. I have a friend of mine, an engineer at VCU, who says he's making them now for about $50, and making them disposable. So they're about the size of a large Band-Aid, and you would put something on. And if we can find a way if we can get the software developed to be able to tie these things together, you can envision a system whereby you put a couple of these electrodes or Band-Aids on a person on the parts you want to monitor and then have them do the task. And they get feedback through the Oculus. You get information on it through the cloud and maybe make adjustments based on how they perform. Well, yes, and so we started with, and So the idea is, can you reach out? Do you have to reach out to somebody to try to get the game developed? In this case, we reached out to 3 different companies to try to integrate to build this game. One was the people at WorldViz who did some of the graphics. The other were the people at Vicon who control the camera systems that we track the motion. And then the third was these people at Motion Monitor that are sort of our game controller. But when they sent us an initial sort of, we contracted for a game. And then we tweaked and continue to change it rather dramatically. And a lot of that's been done by a research associate, Dr. Sam Lykin, who he comes back as a biomedical engineer. He's done a lot of the code to try to develop it. But it's not something where the average person is just going to walk in and say, oh, well, I'll just write a couple lines. I mean, I think this is more complicated than people really understand. And we've been working on this quite aggressively for the last 2 years, and it's it's like, hey, it's really neat, it's working, but good God, if you saw the first parts. Yes, ma'am. I think we need to. You know what? I think I know who my volunteer is because he was so kind to come up here earlier. And Sam, actually, let's set him up with the drop.
Okay.
This won't hurt a bit. So, you want me to get him set and you run this? Okay, let's have you do this. Let's have you. You probably want to pop the glasses off. I think you'll see fine in there. Okay, I'm going to have you just step back to. Actually, I'm going to close your eyes for a second. Step back towards me. There you go. Step back. Step back. Good. All right. Do you see any writing in there? No? Okay, so you've already cleared it. Okay. All right, we're all good. So can you see where you're standing? Can you look down? Okay. Yeah, it's all right. You're not going to see your legs. But can you see the narrow platform? Walk forward. Walk forward. Try to stay on that platform. There, stay there. That's it right there. Good. Okay. Now, if you would be so kind, I just want you to take a half little step to your left. You'll be fine. A little further. Oh, come on. A little more. You'll be okay. Trust me. See, I told you you're fine. One big step to your left. There you go. See, now you're floating. Yeah, keep up that. Go this. So you can see that he's back over. You're good. Go back this way. Okay. We're going to go this way. Just keep going. It figures. It worked in the lab. Just lean to your left. No, he should have dropped, Sam. It's not. Okay, let's bring it back here, and then just drop it. Yeah, just. So, and again, when people think so that's one thing where you sit there and say, "Oh, can you do this at home? Can you do this?" In theory, what happened if he stepped off that platform, everything should have dropped, and he should have had a sensation of sort of this rapid change in height. But again, that now if you can you bring the platform up again, so you feel like you're changing yeah. And so a lot of times people all of a sudden feel that, and if we get a rapid drop, but the idea of being able to know exactly where he is in space based on a couple of gyroscopes that are here, and then we have a infrared camera there that is trying to pick that up. It's not as precise. Again, we're working in our lab with cameras that can tell us within 1/10 of a millimeter where the person is. Rox is already feeling a little queasy. Let's bring up the dodgeball game. Okay, close your eyes. The change in scenery on this is really kind of abrupt, so we always have the client make sure they close their eyes because it can be quite jarring. So we're going to bring up the dodgeball, and we're going to have the first person. You're going to play the game, right, Sam? All right. So you're going to feel what they would feel, or see what they would see. You can't see your body, and it won't move. But so Yeah, you can see your avatar, but you're not going to see it. So this is what the person feels like. So he's sitting there thinking he's going to intercept it, and the balls are being thrown. And the way our system is designed in the lab, it doesn't matter where the person moves. It'll find you. And it'll find you, and it'll hit you where we want it to, and which is kind of nice. And so that was the other thing. You heard the quack. When you hear the quack in this game, well, that you have to duck to score a point. So we kind of mix things up, and with both visual and auditory feedback. Okay, let's look around the gym. Just kind of look up and around. There you go. Oh, now you can really look into yourself, right? So now spin all the way around the other way. Kind of take a look. And now you're looking into yourself from the other side. It's a wee bit creepy. Okay, good. Close your eyes. Let's pull this off you now. Good. If anybody else wants to try it or take a look at this, we're glad to have anybody come up.
Cool. So it was really cool. I can definitely see where like if you were in a quiet setting to where like there was no other noise, it was just you in the game, to where you would like really like psychologically think that you were completely there. Standing on the platform, you immediately like almost felt yourself like brace and your stomach drop. But yeah, it was
We have one more really interesting thing. We get one more volunteer up here. You're going to see something. Here we go. Come on up here, sir. And this will be great because this is going to be a little bit different. Thank you for coming up. And so now what we're going to do is, so what you've seen is just the Oculus. We're going to show you a little program that is going to incorporate the Oculus and the Leap Motion controller. So again, where we say, well, we don't really know where he is in space, but if you could put this on your head, just you pull that back and you pull that down over your eyes. Okay. Now we're going with the objects in front, right? Which are you doing the visual? Oh, visualizer. No, go with the other. Give us just 1 second, guys. It's here. Here, I got it. Okay. Can you get that? Can you get that on the screen? All right. So you see those things in front of you? Bring your arms up in front of you. Bring your hands up. There you go. Okay, so now see where you see the thing that says geometric? Why don't you kind of move those around? Just flick those with your hands a little bit. Can you reach them? Take a step forward and see if you can grab one of those. That's good. Right there. Now reach out and touch the G. Just knock it with your fingers. Up. Take another step forward. Here we go this way. There you go. Now you just kind of... Now lifting them is really hard. But what you're seeing here is his hands are now being tracked, and that's through the 3 little infrared sensors in the Leap Motion controller. This is a very basic program. Wow. That's actually impressive because we haven't had anyone in the lab who's been able to pick those up yet. So you definitely win the prize. Good hands. All right. And so again, what this gives you, so if you would sit there and just bring your hands up in front of your face for a second, make a little fist, open the hands up. Kind of wiggle your fingers. And so you can get this. We're actually tracking some motion with this. And it looks pretty and it looks fairly close. If we were to put some other sensors on it, we'd find some errors. But again, this is something that we're now incorporating into some of the work we're doing to basically track. And we can actually, with this sensor, all we're seeing in his hands there is the hands. But we can track from the elbow to the fingertips with that. Yeah, look at them. The crowd loves it. Wow, that's impressive. We haven't had anyone be able to do that yet. Yeah, stacking them may be a little bit more difficult. All right. All right. We're going to take that. We're going to click out of it, and just take that off. Pull from the, like taking off goggles. Just pull it up front and then off. Good. Thank you. So what I hope you've been able to see is some of the potential and the possibilities for developing these interventions and some of the tools that are out there. And like I said, this is the DK Kit 2. This is the second developer's kit. The Oculus is basically being released to general public in short order. I'm a little worried about it because, again, we've had some really good people working on this for several years, and it's really difficult to kind of put this together. Now, if you're sitting down and they're putting you in a first-person shooter and some of the graphics and things that can come at you, that's fine. But for this to really develop as a technology, it has great potential because we can simulate a lot of different elements using the visual feedback, and it's quite powerful depending on where we actually put the feedback. There's this thing called optic flow. We can change how much information is kind of coming by our peripheral vision, and that's going to give us a perception of motion. Again, it's one more thing that we can use to try to as an intervention for individuals with balance disturbances and so on and so forth. Yes, ma'am. So that's a great question. So Dr. France and I have been using this for the last 2 years with back pain patients in a controlled study, and we are looking at its ability. One, is it safe? So we're sort of the early testing. Is it safe? Is it something that people will engage in? And can we change some behaviors with this? And so far some of the data look positive, and we're excited about that. In terms of the things coming forward, there's a lot of things that we're developing. So Dr. Lycum and I are working on a project to try to improve balance in elderly population, and trying to find ways to use these type of system to provide them some ways to interact that are safe, but judges where they are in space and then tries to find ways to get them to expand their workspace and to work on balance techniques. So there's a lot of things, but it's a lot of development. I think there's going to be, my big fear is that it's going to be, let's use this technology and throw it on everybody and then say, oh, it doesn't work. Well, of course it's not going to work. And then all of a sudden it gets discarded. It's going to take a lot of work to figure out, oh, this works for this type of patient. And again, like I said, this one game that we worked on, it's taken multiple iterations of it, in healthy folks, to kind of figure out what works. And then we're still developing it and still changing it with our current back pain populations to make a better intervention. So, but I think it has tremendous possibilities. I think in the next few years, it's going to explode as, like I said, in 2 years, this 8-pound laptop will probably fit in my pocket. So, I mean, that's just the nature of technology right now, and that'll allow much more to be done with it. Yes? Absolutely. So the question is, do I think there's a reason, should you keep up with third-person interaction or third-person perspective in VR? Yeah, depending on what you're trying to do. And there's some things that we're looking at. So let me go back to one of the things we're talking about with balance. And one of the things that we're talking about doing is Tai Chi is something that people have said, oh, this exercise routine is good for balance. Well, how can we teach it? Can we get a Tai Chi master, mocap them, so basically record the things so that we have it precise, we know what each one are, put them into the space, and then we can use things like a mirror image of that individual. And we don't know if you're going to learn how to do those movements best by being in a first-person perspective, a third, how far do we need to have you removed from that, but we can actually assess that. And there may be things where you say, it's better to start in this third person and then evolve to the first. We don't know. I mean, those are all unknown. So I would not in any sense categorically say, oh, I wouldn't use third person. And the other thing is, like, what I'm finding is that people move more. We've shown in this game and in a static reaching test, people move more when it's in the first person perspective. But it may be you want the person to move less. There are things where you say, you know what, I need this more subtle. I need to control this. And so it's an unknown right now. Yes. Yes. So one of the things, again, the idea of trying to use this world is that what you can do is distort their world so that they actually still think they may be working on the right side, but they're actually engaging on the left side, and then through issues of neuroplasticity by the time they're using this. And again, for anyone, any clinician who's ever seen an individual with left-sided neglect, it's if you ask them to draw anything, again, they'll draw half the clock face. So what you're trying to do is one, start and then bring them out, bring them across as the scene evolves and as therapy evolves. This is right now I presenting the speculation on what could do, what is great potential for it to be done. And this is some people have written looking at stroke rehab. And there's been some early work playing around with it, and I think they've shown some promise, but again, I don't have it right off the top of my head. Yes, hey, Audrey. Yes. I think it's. I don't think there's a difference in strategy, but that's a tricky term to throw out. But it appears that there's clearly actually. Let me take that back. The difference in the way they did it is that individuals with the Oculus tended to lower their center of mass and move their center of mass. They wouldn't displace it as far forward. Now there's two things. They may be saying that I'm going to be more stable, so I'm not going too far out over my base of support. And they may feel less sure of where the markers are for where I am in the world. Because again, if I'm on a 3D TV, I've still got all this real stuff around me. I know what's going on. When I'm in the Oculus, I got nothing. And so if there's any distortion in the space, you go, I don't want to go this far out this way. I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to lower. I'm going to do two things. I'm not going to move my center of mass forward, which will keep me a little more stable. I'm going to lower my center of mass, so now my whole potential energy signature goes down, so I'm in a fundamentally more stable position. So that may be what's going on, but that's really early conjecture on my part.
At this point, I feel like I draw the science cafe too close, but Jim, are you okay if we hold them up and want to?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Be glad to stay. Yep.
Let's all go up and play.
All righty.